47. He crossed the paved court with its noseless statue in the middle of a lawn on which grew a few thujas, pushed open a familiar door, walked up the stairs that reeked of cabbage and cats, and rang the bell. One of the lodgers, a young German, came out and said Bubnov was ill, but knocked in passing on the latter's door, and the writer's great voice, now hoarse and ill-humored, was heard to holler, "Herein!" Bubnov was sitting on the bed, clad in black trousers and an open shirt. His face was swollen and unshaven, his eyelids unflamed. Sheets of paper were strewn over the bed, the floor, and the table, on which stood a glass of turbid tea. It turned out that Bubnov was putting the finishing touches to a short story, and at the same time attempting to compose in German an impressive letter to the gentlemen of the Finanzamt, who were demanding he pay his taxes. He was not drunk, but neither could one call him sober. His thirst had passed, but everything in him had been twisted out of shape and shaken loose by the hurricane. His thoughts wandered about, looking for their old dwelling and finding only ruins. He showed no surprise at the appearance of Martin, whom he had not seen since spring, and at once started to upbraid a certain critic, as if Martin were responsible for that critic's review. They're baiting me," Bubnov kept repeating fiercely, and his face was in deep orbits, looked rather ghastly. He had a tendency to assume that all disparaging reviews of his books were inspired by extraneous considerations, by envy, personal dislike, or the desire to avenge an offense. And listening to his disjointed survey of literary intrigue, Martin found it amazing that anyone could take so much to heart another man's opinion, and he fought the temptation to tell Bubnov that his novella Zorland was a failure, a pseudo-artistic and worthless piece. But then Bubnov abruptly abandoned that topic and began to talk about his having jilted. Martin cursed the wrong-headed curiosity that had brought him there. "I will not name her. Thou must not ask me," said Bubnov, who could switch to the Russian emotional second-person singular with an actor's ease. "Yet remember, I shall not be the last to perish because of her. God, how I loved her, how happy I was. It was the kind of tremendous feeling that makes one hear the thunder of angel wings, but she got frightened of my heavy heights." Martin stayed on a little, felt a swelling of intolerable heartache, and got up in silence. Sobbing, Bubnov accompanied him to the door. A few days later, when he was already in Latvia, Martin discovered in an émigré newspaper another of Bubnov's novellas, fresh from the oven. This time it was excellent, and in it the protagonist, a young German, wore the tie Martin had on that day, pale gray with pink stripes, the treasured relic of a Cambridge club, which Bubnov, though seemingly engrossed in his grief, had appropriated as would a deft thief who wipes his tears with one hand while removing a man's watch with the other. Stopping at a stationer's, Martin bought half a dozen postcards and replenished his 14th fountain pen. Then he proceeded to Darwin's hotel, where he resolved to wait the very last moment of remaining time and go straight from there to the station. The late afternoon sky was a sunless, cheerless bank. The sound of automobile horns now seemed muffled by the mist. An open van passed by, drawn by a pair of scrawny horses. Upon it enough furniture was heaped to furnish a house: a couch, a chest of drawers, a gilt-framed seascape, and a lot of other melancholy chattels. A woman in mourning crossed the dappled asphalt. She was pushing a pram, and in it sat a blue-eyed, attentive infant. On reaching the sidewalk, she pushed down the handle, forcing the pram to rear. A poodle ran past in pursuit of a black whippet. The latter stopped and looked back in fear, raising one bent front paw and quivering. "What's the matter, for goodness sake?" thought Martin. "What's all this to me? I know I'm going to return. I must return." He entered the vestibule of the hotel. Darwin still had not come back. He found a comfortable armchair upholstered in leather, unscrewed the cap of his pen, and began to write his mother. Space on the postcard was limited. His handwriting was large, so he did not manage to say much. "Everything is all right," he wrote, strongly pressing down on the pen. "I stopped at the same old place. Address your letters there. I hope Uncle's toothache is better. I have not seen Darwin yet. The Zelenovs send greetings. Shall not write for a week, as I have absolutely nothing to say. Many kisses." He reread all his twice and unaccountably felt sick at heart, and a chill ran down his back. "No nonsense, please," Martin told himself, and again pressing hard, wrote the Major's widow, asking her to hold his mail for him. After posting the cards, he returned to his chair, leaned back in it, and began to wait, glancing now and then at the clock. A quarter of an hour passed, then 20 minutes, then 25. Two mulatto girls with unusually thin legs went up the stairs. All of a sudden he heard behind his back the powerful breathing he at once recognized. He jumped up, and Darwin, with throaty ejaculation, slapped him on the shoulder. "You scoundrel," mumbled Martin happily. "You scoundrel, I've been looking for you since morning." 48. Darwin had gained some weight. His hair looked thinner. He had grown a well-trimmed little mustache. Somehow, both he and Martin felt embarrassed and could not find a subject of conversation. They kept poking each other, grinning and rumbling. "What are you going to drink?" Darwin asked when they had entered his small but smart hotel room. "Whiskey and soda, a cocktail, or simply some tea?" No matter, anything you like," answered Martin, taking up from the table a large photograph in an expensive frame. "She," said Darwin, "portrait of a young woman with distemper. Those brows meeting above the bridge of the nose, those light eyes, but long graceful neck, everything about her looked very definitive and domineering. Her name's Evelyn. She sings rather well. I'm sure you'll become very good friends with her." Darwin took the portrait and gave it a dreamy look before returning it to its place. "Well," he asked, dropping onto the couch and immediately stretching out his legs, "what's new? I see you still wear the CCC tie." A waiter brought the cocktails. Without pleasure, Martin took a sip of gin-laced vermouth and recounted in a couple of sentences how he'd spent the last 2 years. It surprised him that as soon as he fell silent, Darwin began to talk about himself circumstantially and self-complacently, something that never used to happen before. How strange it was to hear from those indolent, chaste lips a tale of success, of earnings, of splendid hopes for the future. It also transpired now he no longer composed those charming trifles about leeches and sunsets, but wrote articles on political and financial subjects, and was particularly interested in the sepulchral-sounding moratoria, whatever they were. When Martin, taking advantage of a sudden pause, reminded Darwin of the burning chariot of Rose, of their fight, Darwin said indifferently, "Yes, those were the times," and to his horror Martin realized that Darwin's recollections had died or were absent, and the only thing that remained was a discolored signboard. "And what is Prince Vadim doing?" asked Darwin, stifling a yawn. "Vadim is in Brussels, has a job there, and the Zilanovs are here. I often see Sonia. She still has not married." Darwin emitted a huge puff of smoke. "Give her my greetings," he said. "But what about you? Pity you sort of drifting. I'll introduce you to some purported people tomorrow. I'm sure you'll like journalism." Martin coughed. Their time had come to discuss the main matter, the matter he had so much wished to discuss with Darwin. "Thanks," he said, "but that's impossible. I'll be leaving Berlin in an hour's time." Darwin raised himself slightly. "Not really? Where are you going?" "You'll see in a minute. I'm now going to tell you something no one else knows. For several years, but that's not essential." He faltered. Darwin sighed and said, "I've guessed everything. I'll act as best man." "Stop it, please. This is serious. I've been trying all day to get you for the special purpose of talking it over. The fact is I'm planning to cross illegally into Russia from Latvia. Just for 24 hours, yes, and then walk back again. Now here's where you come in. I'll give you 4 postcards. You'll send them to my mother, one every week, every Thursday, let's say. I expect to be back within a shorter time, but I can't foretell how long it will take me to investigate things, to select the exact itinerary, and so forth. Of course, I've already collected a lot of crucial information from a certain person, but I may get stuck, may not be able to wriggle out immediately. You understand my mother must not know anything about it, must receive my postcards from Berlin regularly. I give her my old address. It's all quite simple." Silence. "Yes, of course, it is all quite simple," said Darwin. Silence again. "Only I do not quite see what's the purpose of it. Give it a little thought and you will. Some plot against the good old Soviets? Want to see someone? Deliver a secret message? Rig up something? I confess that as a boy I rather fancied those gloomy bearded chaps who threw bombs at the troika of ruthless governor." Morosely, Martin shook his head. "And if you merely want to visit the land of your fathers, although your father was half Swiss, wasn't he? Still, if you want to see it so badly, wouldn't it be simpler to obtain a regular Soviet visa and cross the border by train? Don't want to? Perhaps after the assassination in that Swiss cafe. You think you won't be given a visa? All right, I'll get you a British passport." "What you're imagining is all wrong," said Martin. "I expected you to understand everything at once." Darwin folded an arm under his head. He could not make up his mind whether or not Martin was pulling his leg, and if not, what really prompted him to embark on that preposterous undertaking. For a while he puffed on his pipe and said, "If, finally, what you are after is just pure risk, there's no need to travel so far. Let us invent something unusual, something that can be executed right now, right here, without overstepping the windowsill. And then let's have a bite and go to a music hall." Martin remained silent, and his face looked sad. "This is absurd," reflected Darwin. "Absurd and rather peculiar. Stayed quietly in Cambridge while they had their civil war, and now craves a bullet in the head for spying. Is he trying to mystify me? What an idiotic conversation." Martin gave a start, looked at his watch, and got up. "Look here, stop playing the fool," said Darwin, smoke pouring profusely from his pipe. "After all, this is scarcely polite. We have not seen each other since Cambridge. Either tell me all intelligibly, or admit you are joking, and we'll talk of other things." "I've told you all," said Martin. "All. And now I must go." He put on his raincoat, picked up his hat from the floor. Darwin, who lay calmly on the couch, yawned and turned his face to the wall. "So long," said Martin, but Darwin did not respond. "So long," Martin repeated. "Nonsense, it can't be true," thought Darwin. He yawned again and closed his eyes. "He won't leave," thought Darwin, and sleepily pulled up one leg. For some time there endured an amusing silence. At last Darwin laughed softly and turned his head, but there was nobody in the room. It seemed impossible that Martin could have left so noiselessly. Perhaps he was hiding behind the furniture. Darwin remained lying a few minutes longer, then glanced warily around the already dimming room, put down his legs and straightened up. "Enough of it. Now come out," he said as he heard a slight rustle from the baggage recess between the wardrobe and the door. Nobody came out. Darwin went over and glanced into the recess. Nobody. Only a sheet of wrapping paper left over for some purchase. Darwin turned on the light, stood frowning, then opened the door leading to the passage. The passage was long, well-lighted, and empty. The evening breeze tried to shut the window. "To H with him," said Darwin, and was lost in thought again, but suddenly he shook himself up and very deliberately started to change for dinner. He felt uneasy, the feeling he seldom experienced lately. Not only had Martin's arrival excited him as a tender echo of their university days, but it had been in itself extraordinary. Everything about Martin had been extraordinary. The roughish tan, the breathless voice, the bizarre dark utterances, that new haughty look in his eyes. However, Darwin had recently had such a well-balanced kind of life. His heart had been beating so regularly, even when he proposed. His mind had so firmly concluded that after the troubles and thrills of youth, he had now reached a smoothly paved road, that he could now hardly fail to subdue the disturbing impression made by Martin, and force himself to believe that the silly jester would reappear this very night. He had already donned his dinner jacket, and was examining his powerful figure and large Roman-nosed face in the wardrobe glass when the telephone rang on the night table. Either because the connection was bad or because he did not remember Martin's telephone tone, he identified it with difficulty. "Reminding you of my request," said the blurred, deep voice. "You'll get the batch within a few days. You'll send them off one by one. My train is about to leave." "What?" I said. "My train." Yes, train." The voice vanished. Darwin resoundingly put down the receiver and for a while kept scratching his cheek. Then he walked to the lift and rode down. There he asked for the timetable. "Yes, correct." "What the devil?" That night did not go anywhere. He kept waiting for something, some sort of other further development. When he sat down to write a letter to his fiancée, he found nothing to write about. Several days passed. On Wednesday, he received a fat envelope from Riga and found inside 4 picture postcards with Berlin views addressed to Miss Edelweiss in Switzerland. One of them, inserted in the Russian text, Darwin discovered a sentence in English. "I often go to music halls with Darwin." It gave him an eerie shock. On Thursday morning, with the dreadful feeling that he was taking part in some evil affair, he gingerly inserted the card with the earliest date into the blue mailbox next to the hotel entrance. A week passed. He posted the second card. After that, he could not stand it any longer and traveled to Riga, where he visited the British consul, the Swiss consul, the general registry, the police. But obtained no information whatever. Martin seemed to have dissolved in the air. Darwin returned to Berlin and reluctantly mailed the 3rd postcard. On Friday, a huge man, obviously a foreigner, called at Zelenov's new publishing house, Russian calendars and political pamphlets. Upon taking a closer look, Zelenov recognized in him the young Englishman who had courted his daughter in London. Speaking German, which Zelenov understood somewhat better than English, Darwin calmly related his conversation with Martin. "But wait," said Zelenov, "there is something not logical here. He said to my daughter he would work in a factory near Berlin. You are sure he went away? What a strange history." "At first I thought he was joking," said Darwin, "but now I don't know what to think. If he is really—" "What a crazy fellow!" exclaimed Zelenov. "Who would have supposed? The young man produced an effect of good sense, of solidity. It's simply hard to believe, you know. Looks like some kind of provocation. Gut. The first thing to do is find if my daughter knows anything about this. Let's go to my quarters." When Sonia saw her father coming in with Darwin, and noticed the odd, solemn expression of their faces, she thought for the 100th part of an instant that Darwin had come to make, this time officially, an offer of marriage. Such momentary nightmares are known to occur. Hello, Sonia," cried out Darwin with very artificial offhandedness. Zelenov, fixing his dull eyes on his daughter and preparing her, begged her not to be frightened and told her practically the whole story right there in the hallway. Sonia turned white as a sheet and sank down on one of the vestibule chairs. "But that's awful," she said softly. After a little pause, she slapped her knees and repeated in a still smaller voice, "That's awful." "Did he tell you anything? Do you have any information?" Zelenov kept asking her in Russian and German. Darwin stood rubbing his cheek, trying not to look at Sonia. He felt the most appalling thing a man of his race and set can feel, the urge to break into tears. "Of course I know all about it," said Sonia in a thin crescendo. Miss Leonov appeared in the background, and her husband signaled to her not to disturb them. "Just what do you know? Come out with it," said Zilanov, and touched Sonia on the shoulder. She suddenly doubled over and began to sob loudly, burying her face in her hands. Then she unbent, emitted a great gasp as if she were choking, swallowed, and began to scream between sobs. "They'll kill him! Oh, God, they'll kill him!" "Control yourself," said Zilanov. "Don't scream. I demand that you explain quietly and clearly what it was he told you. Olya," addressing his wife, "take this gentleman somewhere." "Yes, to the drawing room." "Ah, never mind the electrician. Sonia, stop screaming. You'll frighten Irina. Stop, I demand it." He spent a long time comforting and questioning her. Darwin sat gravely in the drawing room, and the electrician was also there, busy mending a socket and plug, looking up and down again as the light went off and on. "The child is obviously right in demanding that immediate measures be taken," said Zilanov when he and Darwin had regained the street. "But what can one do? Besides, I don't think there is much romance of adventure here as seems to her. She tends to see things that way, very high-strung nature. I simply refuse to believe that a young man pretty much removed from Russian political problems, and more of a foreign cut, I'd say, could prove capable of, well, a high deed, if you like. Naturally, I shall get in touch with certain people, and I may have to go to Latvia, but the matter is fairly hopeless. If he has really tried to steal across the border— By the way, it is so strange, but I was the one, yes, I, who years ago informed Frau Edelweiss of the death of her first husband. A few more days passed. The only point to become clear was that one had to be patient and wait. Not Zilanov, but Darwin went to Switzerland to inform Miss Edelweiss. In Lausanne, everything looked gray. A fine rain was falling. Higher up in the mountain, there was an odor of damp snow, and water dripped from the trees because of the sudden thaw that had followed the first frosts. The car he had hired brought him quickly to the village, skidded on a curve, and overturned in the ditch. The only damage was the chauffeur's bruised arm. Darwin scrambled out, took the wet snow off his overcoat, and asked a villager how far it was to Henry Edelweiss's place. He was shown the shortest way, a footpath through the fir forest. Once out of the woods, he crossed a dirt road, went up an avenue, and saw the ornate greenish-brown house. The rubber soles of his sturdy shoes left patterned impressions on the dark soil in front of the wicket. These footprints slowly filled with muddy water, and a little later the wicket he had not closed properly creaked in a gust of damp wind and violently swung open. And a titmouse alighted on it, uttered a tsi 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 and a incha incha, and flew over the branch of a fir. Everything was very wet and dim. An hour elapsed. Darwin emerged from the brown depths of the melancholy garden, closed the wicket behind him, it promptly opened again, and started back along the path through the woods. There he paused to light his pipe. His ample camel-hair coat was unbuttoned. The ends of his striped scarf dangled at his chest. It was quiet in the woods. All one could hear was a faint gurgle. Water was running somewhere under the wet gray snow. Darwin listened, and for no perceptible reason shook his head. His pipe, which had gone out, emitted a helpless sucking sound. He said something under his breath, rubbed his cheek pensively, and walked on. The air was dingy. Here and there, tree roots traversed the trail. Black fir needles now and then brushed against his shoulder. The dark path passed between the tree trunks in picturesque and mysterious windings. And that was Glory by Vladimir Nabokov. I thought that I remembered it ending with Martin looking at the painting of his childhood and just sort of escaping off into it. But it seems to me like from reading it now a third time, that his friend follows to where he believes Martin may be hiding, I guess. Of his books, I feel like Glory is one of the ones I've always found the most difficult to really stay focused on while reading. It's very... It kind of jumps around in an odd way. There are parts that kind of seem to be wandering and random. And in a way, it's very charming, but also very hard to read straight through. It's one of those things where it's like, it just feels like very personal memories and personal thoughts inside someone's imaginative mind. But even though he's incredibly imaginative, at the same time there's this kind of oxymoron there, where it's like most of the things that he finds himself telling other people because he wants to be so impressive to them, it often turns out to be something that is actually from some sort of fictitious thing, and not actually his own experiences. Like the thing about the part where he goes to a ball, but then it turns out that wasn't a ball at all. It was just a movie that he and Darwin went to see. You know, just little things like that. The characters are very believable. One thing that makes it also kind of hard to get into, the strain between him and his uncle. Like, at first it seems like he really appreciates his uncle and has respect for him, but then as soon as he realizes his mother and his uncle are together, he despises his uncle and can't stand to be around him. And you can tell that his uncle just wants the best for him. And his mother as well. Anyway. If there's anything in particular that throughout me reading Glory, throughout the story, that jumped out at you, feel free to mention it. If there's any part you especially liked, feel free to mention it. Thank you for listening.